Alright, it's Mike Messier. I want to get you the best possible audio, but I also wanted to show you the beach. For those of you that are inbound, live away from the water, it has been stated that living near the water, the ocean of any kind, or a lake is good for you, good for your health. So for those Mike Messier followers or whatever the fucks in inland territories or cities, try to get yourself to some type of ocean, river, marina, a local swimming pool, a bathtub, somewhere near water, maybe at least once a week, once a month, something. Just so you know what the water is good for your system and so forth. But we're not here to talk about water. We're here to talk about Bobby the Brain Heenan, Peyton Manning, and Kurt Cobain. Now you might be wondering, that's quite an odd threesome, a collection, and why would I bring those three guys up together? Well, I've been around the block a few times, and as one gets older and more experienced in life, they see patterns, or I see patterns developing, and I thought I'd share them with you. This is not a particularly unique thought, but the thread of these three guys in conjunction with each other is probably unique. I don't think anyone else has put these three together. Bobby Heenan, pro wrestling personality, best known for his managing, his commentating, a little bit of in-ring work, or a lot of in-ring work as a wrestler himself. But what does Bobby Heenan have to do with anything? Recently passed away, and I have a great deal of respect for Bobby Heenan. I even did a tribute video to Bobby Heenan upon his passing, but when he died not too long ago, less than a month ago, basically the whole claim from a lot of people was he was the greatest of all time, greatest pro wrestling manager of all time, maybe one of the greatest performers of all time, definitely one of the greatest performers of all time, not taking away from him, but the general consensus, of which I didn't really argue, or nor would I argue, is that Bobby the Brain Heenan was the greatest pro wrestling manager of all time. But what about Captain Lou Albano? Now, if you don't know who Captain Lou Albano is, many say that he would be the greatest pro wrestling manager of all time. He managed a plethora, maybe 14 or 16 pairs of WWF at the time, tag team champions, WWF, Worldwide Wrestling Federation, then World Wrestling Federation. I don't think he managed anyone in the WWE era. But if you look at his tag teams, which I believe included the Mongols, or the Executioners, the Wild Samoans, definitely, Mr. Fuji, and Mr. Saito, Barry Windham and Mike Rotundo even, the British Bulldogs even. If you really look at Captain Lou's history with all those tag teams, and also I believe he managed Ivan Koloff when Ivan beat Bruno Sammartino. I believe that was Captain Lou was the manager for Ivan Koloff, so he managed a world singles champion too. A lot of people would say Captain Lou Albano was the greatest manager of all time, and I held my tongue when Dave Meltzer and other folks of that ilk were proclaiming Bobby Heenan the greatest manager of all time. I would not argue that. I mean, I don't think you really have to make a choice, but you could definitely put Albano in the conversation with Bobby Heenan. And if you really know your wrestling, you would agree with that those two guys are neck and neck, or on anybody's list. But because Bobby just passed away, and because he's more current for today's standard of fan, then you would lend yourself to say Bobby Heenan's the greatest manager of all time, period, end of discussion, and so forth. And this really kind of struck home to me when someone did a online meme, as they were, those wonderful things, of kind of a Mount Rushmore, or a Mount Everest, I guess it was a Mount Rushmore of great pro wrestling managers. I'm trying to get away from these people as they get near me. And they put basically Heenan, Paul Heyman, Jim Cornette, and Jimmy Hart. And I made an immediate comment, which is where the hell is Captain Lou Albano? I mean, sorry. I'll definitely put Heenan on that list. Heyman and Cornette, I mean, I don't think I would put both of those guys on the list. Jimmy Hart, I think you can make a case for. But without Captain Lou Albano on a Mount Rushmore of pro wrestling managers, that's not a list in my book. That's a joke. That's a cute meme from someone who doesn't really know what they're talking about. Now we talk about switching gears to pro football, of which I'm not Shannon Sharp or Michael Strahan or some great goddamn football expert, but I do know this. Last year or year before that, when time goes by quick, when Peyton Manning retired, shortly after winning the Super Bowl, and of course, good for him, he was smart. He was under investigation for illegal activities. I don't know if it was human growth hormones or steroids or something of that nature. But basically, Peyton Manning, under investigation, retires after winning the Super Bowl. Basically retired a Super Bowl champion, a two-time Super Bowl champion, and by my memory, losing 2 Super Bowl games and losing many AFC championship games to Tom Brady. And, but suddenly, Peyton Manning, the greatest football player of all time, the greatest quarterback of all time. Is he the greatest quarterback of all time? Just to me, and that's a whole conversation, but to look at, even at the time, Tom Brady's record and Peyton Manning's record, I don't think you can make a case then or now that Peyton Manning had achieved more than Tom Brady. You can make a case that his regular season statistics were better. You can make a case that he went to 2 different teams, I believe, as a Super Bowl champion. The Broncos, of course, and before that, the Indianapolis Colts, I believe. He won a championship with them. I know he did. So you could definitely make a case that he was number 2, Peyton Manning. But even of his generation, you couldn't make a case. You could even, if you want to be a real fucking asshole, you could make a case that he was not even the greatest Peyton of all time, or the greatest Manning brother of all time. You could make, if you wanted to, say that his younger brother achieved more before he did, meaning Eli Manning. No, I could be wrong. I believe Eli, I'm trying to get the chronology straight, but I believe Eli won a Super Bowl, then Peyton won one, then Eli won one, then Peyton won a second one. I don't think Eli won 2 before Peyton won any. But I think if you wanted to be a dick, you could compare the stats and the ages and say that this other Manning accomplished more with less, or in less time, Eli Manning, than his brother. But of course, upon retirement, not death in this case, but retirement, suddenly Peyton Manning, his stock goes through the roof. Because now the hot topic is of the day. And if you remember this, just a couple of years ago, suddenly that hot topic that day was, is Peyton Manning the greatest of all time? Is Peyton Manning the greatest of all time? Is he better than Tom Brady? Is he better than Tom Brady? Well, apparently not. I think history would prove that another Super Bowl later, Tom Brady is the greatest. But hey, you can make a case that Joe Montana is the greatest of all time. If you want to say Sonny Jurgensen, if you want to say, whoever the fuck. I mean, it's really a generational thing. And I think this is just something that I heard from previous generations, but now I'm experiencing myself, getting to that point in my own age and wisdom, where I'm realizing it's true, that everything is of the now. Everything is of the now. So you could say, Star Wars, greatest movie of all time. Goodfellas, greatest movie of all time. What about Citizen Kane? What about Nosferatu? You can make a case for a lot of movies being the greatest of all time, but that wasn't part of the trilogy I was talking about. Kurt Cobain. Look, I really enjoy Kurt Cobain quite a bit. Nirvana. But they made, I believe, 3 traditional studio albums. I think just 3, maybe 4. And then they had the Incesticide and the B-sides and the different compilations and the live and writing and all that stuff. But Nirvana, even at their time, were basically considered number 2 to Pearl Jam as far as mainstream popularity, depth of material, and so forth. But upon death, Kurt Cobain becomes the greatest singer of his generation, the voice of his generation. And to his credit, Eddie Vedder and his associates in Pearl Jam basically took a step back, said, look, we're not going to play this comparison game. We're going to do our own thing. They took on Ticketmaster, which was probably a waste of their time and efforts because nobody really understood what they were trying to do with that suit against Ticketmaster, that whole cause. as far as keeping ticket prices affordable for people. And so, you know, the ticket buying customers basically paid the price, quite literally, by not, you know, helping Pearl Jam more. That's another story. But to say that Kurt Cobain was the voice of his generation, it probably is something that Cobain himself didn't want. He wouldn't want himself named a spokesman for anybody. He would probably want people to speak for themselves. And it diminishes, in my opinion, the popularity at the time of Pearl Jam, which had a monster, you know, at the time, CD, album, 10. And, you know, all the things that Pearl Jam did in the 90s after Kurt Cobain died, whether he was murdered or suicide, whatever you want to call it or speculate, or faked his own death, that's a whole other deal. But if you look at it and say, who is greater or who is more relevant? At the time, Pearl Jam was a lot more media friendly, I guess, you know. But because Death Makes Angels of Us All, you know, Jim Morrison, then suddenly Kurt Cobain is the voice of his generation because he died young. And because you can never say that he lost his touch, or you can never say that they made an album that was just crap, or he made some fucking electronica album experimental thing, or he tried to be back, or he tried to do something that wasn't in his wheelhouse, or whatever the fuck, which I hate that term, wheelhouse, too. I don't like that term. It's in my wheelhouse. What the fuck does that wheelhouse mean? So, basically, Bobby the Brain Heenan, you can say he's the greatest manager of all time. By doing so, you're going along with the masses, which is fine, but you're also discounting Captain Lou Albano. You can say Peyton Manning's the greatest football player of all time, or the greatest quarterback of his generation. You're discounting, obviously, Tom Brady. You're just celebrating Peyton Manning Day upon his retirement. And you can also say that Kurt Cobain was the greatest singer of his generation, but you're overlooking Eddie Vedder, obviously. You can make a case for others, Chris Cornell if you wanted to, but if you want to talk about that early mid-90s grunge era, you know, I would definitely say Vedder number 1, Cobain number 2, Chris Cornell number 3. And by doing that, I don't think it's a disregard or a disrespect to anyone. I'm just saying the obvious, which is, you know, by dying young or retiring, you've increased your stock. Jimmy Superfly Snuka dies, and suddenly it's okay that he was up for, you know, a 20 or 30-year murder trial type of deal. You know, death is kind of a good thing. I mean, death can help your career in a bizarre way. It can't help your life because it ends it, but death basically clears the slate of whatever allegations or charges you're up against. So, but that wasn't really the point of it. The point was, keep things in perspective, folks. If you're going to insist, because we all kill time during the day, you know, we all waste our lives with YouTube videos and so forth, and it's fun. But if you're going to make lists and rankings of greatest of all time, or where does he rank, or blah, 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 keep in mind that the person who just died or the person who just retired automatically increases their stock. Okay? So now a month after Bobby Heenan died, or 2 or 3 weeks after, you know, a couple of years after Peyton Manning retired, and, you know, 23-something years after Kurt Cobain has left this earth, in some regard, if he has in fact died, which some people might even speculate that it's another story, then you can start ranking them if you really need to. Of course, you could be doing something better with your lives, like trying to prevent world war, or feed the homeless, or walk, or exercise, or something of that nature. But my basic point is this: don't believe the hype. Don't rank people above. If you have to rank people at all, don't knee-jerk reaction, rank them higher. It's not bad right there. Don't rank them higher than what they were or what they need to be just because they're currently dead or currently retired. Doesn't make them better than they were. And it certainly should not, in my opinion, death or retirement shouldn't weigh the balance out of whack, is the basic point. So, you know, blah, 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 blah. Mike Messier, thank you for watching the video. And try to, you know, if you do live in some community without fresh water, try to enjoy the water like this. I mean, it's kind of nice. All right, I'll see you later. Just kind of, you know, as you've hung with this video, I'll give you a few seconds of nice water.